The military in the UK had accused the US of using DU in Afghanistan. Is that true? Is that correct? Do I have that right?
No.
Okay, okay, good.
Not that I know of. That'd be cool if
Okay,
they had.
all right. Well, then maybe I've got that completely wrong. I thought I'd read something like that.
It might have been the stuff on Germany.
Maybe.
Uh,
Okay, well, good. I'm glad anyway, I'll look into that some more. And what about, uh, has there been any evidence of, then to ask you this directly, do you think there has been any evidence of the U.S. using, um, depleted uranium or NATO in Afghanistan?
um, the evidence we have a leaked transport letter which shows that DU was in Afghanistan. It doesn't say whether it was used. We have a leaked report from the German army who had warned their troops that DU may have been used and gave them guides on how to protect their health. Now, it's all a question of the nature of the conflict, really. That in the beginning of the conflict in Afghanistan, most of the attacks were airstrikes and they were launched from carriers. Now, it's usually the A-10 aircraft, which is the Army and Air Force's ground attack aircraft, which use DU, and they wouldn't necessarily be used in the early stages of the conflict. Once they got air bases in Afghanistan, then they brought in A-10s and may well have been engaged in some fighting with DU. But the other issue is that the Taliban didn't have a huge number of armoured vehicles. And obviously, if you're not going after armoured vehicles, then it's more effective to use the high explosive ammunition in the A-10 rather than DU. So there may have been some used in the early part of the conflict, but we can't tell at this moment. And there may already have been DU contamination there from the Soviet invasion in the 1980s, where Russians may well have used DU then as well. So,
Wow. Okay, so I didn't know that Russia was one of the user countries. That's interesting. Okay, and then let's see. I guess that's more or less what I wanted to ask you about, and I appreciate what what you've said. It's been really interesting, and also I guess there's just one other question left, and that is really what people can do. What do you think the most effective thing for individuals to do? We were talking to I talked to you earlier about the petition that International Coalition of Ban Uranium Weapons has on your website, and then also you were talking about the bank or investment strategy, and I wanted to see if you wanted to say more about that, the latter.
yeah, I mean, we try and support campaigners and activists to do what they can. I mean, we've got guides on our website, which is bandepleteduranium.org, for how to write to your senators or representatives, try and get them to raise this issue. We have guides of how to work on trying to encourage banks to disinvest. I mean, there are a lot of banks, particularly in the US, who have shares in people like General Dynamics and Alliant Tech Systems, who manufacture DU rounds for the US military. We also have a long-running petition, which has probably around 300,000 signatures, and that's growing, and you can sign that online, or you can print out copies and sign them in the high street. But the main issue at the moment, I think, is particularly for US citizens, is that your government is refusing to release the coordinates of where DU has been used in Iraq. And until we get those coordinates, then it's very difficult to undertake any research or any remedial work or any risk awareness work with children, families and civilians working in those areas. So the one key thing you could do is write to your representative and to request that they try and encourage the US government to release this data. We've submitted a formal request. We met with US diplomats a couple of weeks ago, and we'll just see where we get. We're not the first people to try and get this data, but perhaps the new administration will take a slightly more progressive stance. But that's the one key thing which US citizens can do right now.
So we could say, where should we ask them to release the data? To a UN commission, or?
That would be to the United Nations and to NGOs such as ourselves.
Okay, great. Okay, That's fantastic. Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much for your time, and the information you have is so specific. It's really, really helpful. I really appreciate it.
That's it. You're very welcome.